Now, turning our attention to the issue of St. John of God's. Trade unions in recent days have said the prospect of a disorderly collapse of the country, one of the country's main disability and mental health service providers, would be devastating, and the government needs to review the entire funding model for the sector. This was after reports came through that St. John of God's Community Services had warned the Minister for Health, Stephen Donnelly, it could face liquidation or having to sell assets or properties to pay off its debts. It maintains such developments could have huge implications for up to 8,000 children, adolescents and adults who relied on it. And with that in mind, we're talking this morning to Jack Fitzpatrick, who is of St. Mary of the Angels Parents and Relatives Association. Jack, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jerry.
This isn't the first time that the warning bells have been sounded about the funding model and the financial position of St. John of God's. What are your concerns in relation to where we are now and the implications for St. Mary of the Angels in Beaufort?
Well, we have two major issues, really, Jerry. First of all, with the announcement last year that St. John of God's were handing back the service to the HSE, is disruption to us and something that we would prefer not to happen. Like we had the change over in 2005 from the Franciscan Sisters to St. John of God's. And, that's traumatic for people, any change like that after 41 years, it was a huge thing. And here we are again now in the same situation. But worse than that was the second announcement which came there only a few weeks ago by the CEO of St. John of God's, Claire Dempsey, that they may have to sell off their assets, to pay down debt. And this is something that has always bothered me about St. Mary of the Angels. When the Franciscan Sisters left in 2005, they transferred over the ownership and the whole place, nearly 35 acres, to St. John of God's. And in a press release released at the time, what they said was that we are doing this. Therefore, this decision has been taken to guarantee the future of St. Mary of the Angels and its associated services. And while St. John of God's are the title holders of St. Mary of the Angels, we see them as guardians of it for now, for as long as they're there. And certainly, if they decide to leave St. Mary of the Angels, as far as we're concerned, St. Mary of the Angels belongs to the people of Kerry.
You feel it doesn't belong to be sold as part of assets to pay down any debt?
It's not an asset, and it shouldn't be treated by anybody as an asset. And certainly, if they do decide to leave, I do not want to see a situation where they're leasing or renting St. Mary of the Angels to the HSE. That is not the way it should be. It should be. I mean, it really, for the long term for St. Mary of the Angels. And I'm talking about, long after those that are there now, pass on, that St. Mary of the Angels belongs to the people of Kerry, and it should be secure for people with intellectual disabilities and physical disabilities for now and for all time into the future. And really, this is something that needs to be addressed. And maybe this whole issue with St. John of God's now is something that that it needs to happen to ensure that that the powers that be put some system in place that secures the St. Mary of the Angels from now on and into the future.
Okay, we've Eilish Perryman on the line as well from the Parent Residents Association. Eilish, you have a son who's a resident. What are your concerns about what's happening?
Well, I concur with Jack. Everything he has said is so true. But definitely the Department of Health have failed miserably in their duty of care to our disabled community. 7 months on now, the department the HSE have been in talks with the St. John of God's, and nothing has been put on the table yet. They have failed to fund St. John of God's sufficiently to the tune of 32 million over the past few years. And the Department of Health does not take into consideration all the unpaid work that the religious sisters and brothers have done in the past, and have consequently have continued to underfund the orders. The St. John of God's, they take care of people with mild disabilities, and then the more high dependency care people, they're not getting any extra funding for them at all. St. Mary of the Angels is home to our sons and our daughters, and we certainly will not stand for them to sell that place. The government, the HSE are in talks with Department of Health, and they're not getting anywhere. But the government can afford to give Robert Watt, a new Secretary General, an 80,000 increase to bring his salary to 292,000. That's a raise of 80,000. €1,500 per week. Can you tell me where there's common sense there, while services for the most vulnerable in our society are grossly underfunded and non-existent for a lot of disabled people who are living at home?
Okay, last September, Eilish, St John of God's announced it would cease running the majority of its healthcare services due to a funding crisis. It said it would transfer responsibility to the HSE over a 12-month period, and the HSE could arrange either to run the services itself or transfer them to another operator. Now, the HSE subsequently provided funding of 139 million this year to allow the organisation continue to operate its current level of services. It also received additional money to deal with the impact of COVID-19. So that's a fair bit of money. However, it still doesn't deal with the 32.5 million euro accumulated debt of the organisation. That's the problem.
That is the problem. But there has been underfunding for years, Jerry. Underfunding for years and years. And as you know, this cannot go on.
It's not sustainable. It's certainly not sustainable. And look, there's been questions about these sort of organisations and the sort of salaries that were paid and all of that. We won't go back into that. We are where we are now in terms of the debt and the worry. Is it your concern that this is on the table, that this is a possibility, the sale of St Mary the Angels as an asset?
Of course it is. And you know, I'd be advocating for us to go to the judiciary to make a decision on this, as did Mrs O'Donoghue years ago in Cork, when it cost the Department of Education more money because in his judgment, he decided that severely handicapped people they called it at that time, were entitled to an education, and they actually got an education for an extra month in the year. So maybe it's time for us to go to the judiciary and let them decide, you know,
on the future of it.
Okay,
Jack Fitzpatrick, you've written a letter to all local TDs arguing your case that it shouldn't be treated as an asset of any service provider to be sold off to clear your debts, and you're calling on them to take action on this and get some answers. Is that right?
Absolutely, Jerry, yeah. And I think at the end of the day, like, the Minister for Health is the paymaster in all of this, you know, and certainly St John of God's needs to withdraw that statement insofar as it relates to St Mary the Angels, that they may have to sell assets, because it is not an asset of theirs. You know, and we can't have that. That is too much stress for people, you know, to have that hanging over them where they may be, their homes are being threatened. You know, it's absolutely disgraceful, really. You know, and we certainly don't want that. But with the TDs and Minister Foley contacted me immediately, and said that she would be raising for the Minister for Education. You know,
sure. What do you want to happen? What would you like to see happen? Would you like to see the HSE take it over? Would you like to see another service provider brought in to run the services there?
Obviously, Jerry, from our point of view, I suppose, you know, that there's less disruption if the issues that are outstanding with St John of God's can be ironed out and things continue as they are. You know, things are going well, and that obviously. But if that can't happen, the second issue to us, regardless of whether they stay or whether they go, the issue of long-term ownership of St Mary the Angels needs to be sorted out. It's a 35 acres, beautiful grounds with millions and millions of euros of facilities and amenities there, and it needs to be secured for people who will need that service for decades and centuries to come. It has to be secured. Many a county would give anything to have something like we have in Kerry, and we shouldn't allow it to be taken from us. You know? Like, there are situations that have happened up the country in Sligo, for example, in Craig House, where nuns owned as a facility, something similar, and it has ended up being leased now to the HSE. That's not satisfactory for us. Okay.
All right. Listen, that's where we're going to leave it for the time being. We'll see what happens out of that, but thanks for raising the issue. Jack Fitzpatrick and Eilish Perryman of the St Mary the Angels Parents and Relatives Association. Some of your views on that. Listener says, my sister Kate has been a St Mary the Angels resident since 1985. We travel the road from Beaufort to Beaufort every fortnight. It's a huge part of all our lives. When our lovely mum was diagnosed with terminal stage 4 metastatic lung cancer, the only relief she had was Katie, who was so well looked after in St Mary the Angels. This wonderful place needs to be protected, not only for the residents but the peace of mind for those who love them. That's from Joan Ennis in Castletownbere and Switzerland. Hello, my sister has lived in St Mary the Angels for 3 decades. She's profoundly disabled physically and intellectually. It's her home along with other vulnerable adults, a lot of whom she would view as family and friends. Also, she has friends and the carers who look after her. Hazel can't do anything for herself, and it wasn't for St Mary's the Angels, Hazel wouldn't be as well as she is today. There, where she has access to healthcare that she needs. She has a GP, physiotherapist and access to a dentist. She has access to a swimming pool and gets taken out for day trips, and she lives a very enjoyable life. These are her human rights. My parents are no longer spring chickens and wouldn't be able to offer Hazel the comforts of medical care she receives at Mary the Angels. It's a loving home, not an asset, says Noel Robb. And Joyce Banbury and Ken Mayer says, my brother lives at St Mary the Angels. It's inherently wrong that a property like St Mary the Angels, signed over to the St John of God's for the specific purpose of caring for people with disabilities, should ever be considered a potentially saleable asset. The upkeep and development of property has been financed by the government funding and local fundraising. St John of God's didn't pay for the property, and therefore if they have to hand over management, they should also hand over the ownership. This should be done with a clause that St Mary the Angels will always be used for disability services in the county in the future. Some of the views coming through on that. Sinn Féin Deputy Pat Daly, St Mary the Angels is a treasure close to the heart of all people in Kerry. Sale should not be contemplated. What we hold. Councillor Aoife Thornton as well gets in touch with us in relation to that and says it's absolutely imperative that St Mary it's a critical service and home to so many urgently needs to be supported, says Councillor Aoife Thornton. And Councillor Michael O'Shea Fianna Fáil says it belongs to the people of Kerry. It is not the assets of any organisation. A listener gets in touch and says, this is Councillor Norman Moriarty of Fianna Fáil getting in touch to say, St Mary the Angels is the centre of excellence in care provision that should be seen as a shining beacon for all to follow. It would be a total injustice for this facility to be sold off. The state is guilty of having abdicated its responsibility in this area over generations, and what was provided privately and by the friends and family should not be taken away now.